I'm Manogna and I work with the education and outreach team here. We're really thrilled to be hosting this conversation today with Ranbir Sidhu and Jeet Tail. To briefly introduce these two influential writers, Ranbir Sidhu is the author of 6 books, including Dark Star, Deep Sing Blue, and Good Indian Girls. He is a recipient of the Pushcart Prize and a New York Foundation of the Arts Fellowship. His work has been featured in leading publications worldwide, and his screenplay, The Afterlife, is currently in pre-production and will be set for filming this year. Jeet Tail is a poet, novelist, librettist, and musician. The first installment of his Bombay trilogy, Narcopolis, was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, won the DSC Prize, and became an unlikely bestseller. His book of poems, These Arrows Are Correct, won the Sahitya Academy Award, and his musical collaborations include the opera Babur in London. He is the editor of the Penguin Book of Indian Poets. His latest collection of poetry is I'll Have It Here, and his new novel, Melanin, is forthcoming. Before we begin, I'd also like to mention that Night in Delhi and Dark Star are available for purchase today here at MAP. And without any further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Ranbir and Jeet to kickstart this evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much. A real pleasure to be here, to be in conversation with Ranbir. We go back 12 years or so?
12 long years.
12 long years. I'm always interested to follow Ranbir's writerly trajectory because you never know what to expect. The last time we were in a conversation like this was with a book called Dark Star, which is about as different from Night in Delhi as it's possible to get. Dark Star is told in the first person by an elderly woman looking back over her life. It's a kind of a shattering lyric meditation that covers much ground, including migration, gender, the unbridgeable divide between spouses, Indian politics, and the losses brought by old age. The book was dedicated to your mother, who died while you were working on it. And I bring it up because it's hard to believe at times that Dark Star and Night in Delhi are by the same author.
Shall I read?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to read a short section. Hold on. Hello. Perfect. Hello. I'm going to read a chapter from relatively early on in the book. I'm not sure there's much you need to know. The narrator has gone to see his partner sing, and he hasn't seen him sing for a while. Yeah, that's probably it. The auto struggles through the final few alleys, while the packed, uneven mud of what's left of the roadway jolts my head against the roof bar. We come to a stop, and the driver deposits me at the end of a lightless alley. When he drives away, his single working headlight jitters madly across the half-built house fronts, and soon I'm plunged into almost total darkness. I find the door I'm looking for and push through it into a hallway, also unlit, except for light leaking from under another, farther doorway. I grope until I find the handle. The rumble of voices from inside beckons like an invitation, and I step into a low-ceilinged room. The walls are painted a faded yellow, and ornate velvet couches, all different colors, are scattered throughout. A far too large for this room chandelier hangs so low everyone has to duck or strain their neck to pass it. Beyond is a low black-painted stage, with a single microphone on a stand sitting abandoned. Music's playing. Mohammed Rafi and Asha Bhosle. The voices spin through the air, making it dizzy, narcotic. Those old songs are like a time machine, and here we are, hurtling backward, into a destroyed past. I know most here by sight, but hardly anyone by name. This is Jaggy's scene, not mine, not so much mine. A few heads nod towards me in welcome, and someone hands me a bottle of whiskey. I don't see who it is, but they must have noticed I broke one of the unspoken rules, one I almost always break, which is to bring your own. I usually don't need it, as Jaggy always has enough to spare. I take a drink and search for him. One of the queens eyes me up and down and says, "You gonna drink all that?" I shake my head and pass the bottle. She's in a miniskirt and sequined halter top, and her belly bulges over her belt. "Your girl's in the back," she says. There's a whiff of moustache clinging to her upper lip, and her bare legs are unshaven. "I guessed," I say, and she takes her seat and pats the empty cushion next to her. "You don't want to disturb her while she's preparing," she says, and I accept the offer and sit down. Her strong perfume cuts through the cigarette smoke. It's mostly queens tonight, a few gays and a couple of the regular fag hags I've seen around. She presses up against me and lights a cigarette and offers it, then lights one for herself. We've talked before, but I don't know her name. Once, when I asked, she said, "Anything you want." So I started calling her that, "Hey, anything you want." But she didn't get the joke. Every time I said it, she made a face like I was offering her something she clearly did not want. She's not the fastest train in the station. I'm happy to let her slide against me and chatter as I wait for Jaggy's set. She always has something to say. "She's in love," she tells me, and lays her head against my shoulder, a T-boy in Sarkit, a J-block market. Not a boy, of course, but who knows how old he is? She has no idea about age, hers, or anyone else's. And a T-boy's. How's she supposed to guess that? She lifts her head and takes a drink and hands the bottle back to me. And as she turns, I see the faint outline of a bruise covering one side of her face, poorly masked by makeup. I don't ask about it. Another of the unspoken rules. I doubt there's a person here not hiding a bruise or three. They had a little make-out session, she and the T-boy, in the lobby of the building next to the watch store. She sighs, thinking about it. They were interrupted by one of those damn aunties. She came charging at them with her umbrella. The boy just ran. Out the door and into the street. "Poof," she says. "Gone like that." "And now where is he?" she asks, throwing her hands up. "Do you think I made him lose his job?" she says. She wants to know. I shrug in response. The struggles of T-boys, amorous or otherwise, are not high on the ladder of my concerns. She talks on, telling me about his gorgeous tight ass, the way his lips curled around hers when they kissed, and I distract myself by watching the room. The club's owner, Madame Yo-Yo, threads herself among the bodies, dressed in a red silk kimono, embroidered with a dragon, and holding aloft a champagne bottle and flute. Each time she pauses to chat, she leans so far forward, I'm afraid she's going to topple, takes a long sip, nods her head, and refills her glass. The kimono glitters in the reflected light. When she spots me, she moves in my direction. I can't say walk, as her legs are hidden, and give the impression of gliding, maybe an inch or so above the ground. "Anything you want" is still talking, worrying if she'll ever see her T-boy again, when Madame Yo-Yo cuts her off. "Not that T-boy still," she says, and turns to me. "She's been talking about nothing but that bloody T-boy for a whole week." She sits down on the other side from "Anything you want" and presses against me, so I'm crushed between the pair of them. "Where have you been hiding?" she says. "We haven't seen your face in a long time." "Around," I say, and she laughs and tells me she thought maybe me and Jaggy were on the outs. It's true. I haven't seen Jaggy's set in weeks, but between the big men and unders, I've hardly had a night free. I've heard him rehearsing on the terrace a few times, new songs mostly, only a couple of which I recognized. This boy, Madame Yo-Yo chants, and wraps an arm around my neck and kisses me on the cheek. She's a small woman with a broad, round face that's always smiling, Assamese or something, no one knows for sure, or what her real name is. Jaggi brought me here soon after we met, and at that first meeting she turned to me and before greeting me took my face in both her hands and laughed. "You told me he was an orphan. This boy is no orphan." Jaggi was unfazed. "It's the story he tells," he said. "And whose business is his story but his?" She kept staring into my eyes, as if trying to uncover a secret, another history, had buried me, and I pulled away and insisted I was an orphan. She had no right to question it. The exchange left me angry. She'd seen through my lie into some hidden chamber. She releases me and nods towards the door. "That one," she says, not hiding her scorn, indicating a dark-haired young woman who's just walked in. Some Frenchy journalist. And though she promises she's not writing about the place, Madame Yo-Yo doesn't believe her. "There's a reason we keep this place low-key," she says. "But do you think this woman cares? All these journos cared about is their next byline. Steal this world for themselves, make a big splash in their dumbass scoop." The room is filled up, the couch is overflowing, figures perched on armrests and laps, walls crushed with bodies. Someone on stage waves to Madame Yo-Yo and the lights dim, and a spotlight illuminates a far door. The music stops abruptly and she rises and holds her glass high and taps it against the bottle. Into the sudden silence, she calls for everyone to put their hands together and welcome our very own, the magnificent Jaggi himself. She sets the glass and bottle down and is still applauding when she takes her seat again. Music fills the room and the door inches open and a foot appears. Then a hand floating through the air, a few curls of hair, the wisp of a chunni, and finally, there is Jaggi. My Jaggi, I think, not theirs, not hers, not anyone else's. Wrapped head to toe in gold, a glittering gold sari. The spotlight makes him glow. I feel a rush of pride as the applause transforms into cheers. The music rises, and he takes the microphone and holds it, letting the moment build. The whole room stretches forward, craning their necks as they wait. It's like a cloudburst when he sings. The tension breaks and all that drenching, refreshing rain that is his voice pours down onto us. I realize I've been holding my breath and let out a long sigh. Jaggi has a way. I knew it when I first met him. He can hold a stranger mesmerized. A whole room, no doubt. No doubt a stadium full of strangers. Everyone is hooked. It's an old song, one of his standards, one of my favorites. Soon the room is singing along, and I'm drifting into dreams, or fantasies, of the two of us, walking hand in hand along a Kerala beach.
Thanks so much for that. I notice you picked one of the least offensive passages, maybe. Night in Delhi is the kind of book Indian novelists don't write. Maybe because Indian novelists are really often too concerned with what their aunties and uncles might think, and their parents and their extended family. So it works like a kind of a self-censorship. So let's talk about discomfort versus comfort, and where so much of art and literature, Indian art and literature in particular, tries to make us comfortable, you don't.
This question of discomfort is interesting because I don't set out to deliberately make people uncomfortable, but I do set out to try to go to emotional places that make me uncomfortable. That are, in a sense, sort of emotional discoveries, right? Well, so, I think it's very important when we write or when we make art that we push ourselves to those places that scare us. And I don't mean in a horror way or a genre way or a sort of obvious way, but in a way that genuinely makes us as artists uncomfortable and makes us learn something about ourselves, right? And I think that learning hopefully passes on to the reader. But yeah, you're right. So much of what people read these days, if you're reading YA, if you're reading genre, if you're reading sci-fi, if you're reading so-called literary fiction, which is a genre unto itself now, is about reflecting back to your own biases, your own sort of whatever, your own sort of thoughts of the world. And not making you question who you are as a person, where you are in this world, and what it is, and whether I think that I think that's sort of fundamental. Go on. Sorry,
Yeah, you were saying about discomfort and how you, as a writer, go towards the spaces where you feel a kind of discomfort or a sense of discovery, maybe. What did you learn about yourself through the writing of Night in Delhi?
Before I answer that, when I was young, I was thinking like 16, 17 years old, I read a biography of the photographer Diana Arbus, the American photographer in New York. And she always told her students to go search out that which you fear the most. It's something that she did. Yeah, and it stuck with me at that age, and it's obviously stayed with me at this age. I'm not sure what I learned about myself in this book. I don't know, man. I've got to speak to my therapist, which I don't have, which you can't afford because you know how much money we get for books in India. But yeah.
This book has been called a queer novel, and I know that you're not completely happy with that label. Tell us why.
Oh.
There was the panel that you did that I happened to...
At BLF, right. Yeah, because queer has become everything. Like everyone is queer now. It's hard not to be queer. I'm sure everyone in this room probably has at some point questioned whether they're queer. It's such a catch-all and such an easy marketing term and such a sort of and such an undangerous word that it's so easy, to call yourself like a sort of a queer writer or a queer artist or especially if you want to get some grants. And so it makes me uncomfortable in that sense.
I think you might have just turned off a few prospective buyers of your book, but hey, so it goes. Let's talk about something that we touched on earlier. You've written such a diverse kind of set of books. It's so not easy to pigeonhole you as a certain type of writer. And I was just wondering if that's ever been a consideration when you're writing, where do you think of an audience and its demands, and do you think of confounding those demands?
I never think of an audience. I never think of an audience's demands. I don't think of confounding their demands either. I think lately, we've had this conversation, the two of us, that we've got to make some money, so we've got to write a bestseller somehow. Whether this is going to happen or not is, who knows. Which would mean thinking of an audience, right? And in that sense, the audience would be like the editors in New York or London, who would sort of then say, "Oh my God, this is like what the world wants now." But I think I've always struggled to make sure I don't repeat myself. Which is very confounding in the publishing world, where you make your name by repeating yourself often, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, because it's I think one of my favorite writers, Patrick Modiano, the French writer who won the Nobel Prize, he's written 30 some novels. Every single one of those novels almost is exactly the same book, exactly the same book, and I love them all. So maybe, but But for me, I get bored very easily, I get very impatient, and if I find as you say, from Dark Star to this, the leap is quite enormous. Yeah, I really try not to repeat myself, but who knows, if I've got to make a bestseller, I might sort of try, if I want to buy a little house in the south of France.
I mean, I think the obsessions don't change from book to book. Your kind of, the underlying concerns never really change, but your structure, the form might change. For me, when I read this, I read it like a kind of a thriller, a page turner, and I read it fast. I got a sense of speed, and I wondered if when you wrote it fast.
I wrote it in spurts. So sections I wrote different sections very fast. But at first it was quite difficult moving into the story. Because I think with each book gets more difficult. And you want to always question yourself and always keep the narrative alive, and that's so it becomes you really want to stop yourself from doing those things that you can do easily. And you sort of basically want to cut yourself off of the knees the moment you start seeing yourself doing what you can just do like that. And so every time I would come to that point, I would sort of stop myself and then ask myself, what am I doing here? I write without having any idea where I'm going to go, any idea where the story is going to go, who the people are going to be, who the characters are going to be. And I find that very liberating and freeing, I suppose.
We've been talking about, it's true, we have talked about writing bestsellers, but the thing I begin to suspect about you, Ranbir, is that even if you were to write a bestseller, it would be a pretty twisty ride. I am struck by the fact that the narrator in this book doesn't have a name, and he's an anti-hero that's really kind of unique in the pages of Indian fiction. I think it's fair to say that. Did you worry, talking about bestsellers and making a living, because as a working writer you do have to think about that. You don't want to get a job in a horrible newspaper or a terrible ad agency or worse. When you wrote this novel in particular, because this is as twisty as it gets, did you worry at any point that you might not find a publisher?
Yeah. I sent a very early version to my editor at Westland, and I was terrified. It was like maybe a half length of this manuscript, and within a couple of weeks she'd written back, or we talked, and she was completely in love with it, which surprised me. So that helped me sort of keep going. And then I knew that at least in India we'd get a publisher. My American agent, we both knew that this book would not sell in the US. Beyond it's too short, but it's also too morally ambiguous. And American publishers really want something that tells you who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, even when there's nuance and complexity. They want something where the ground is solid, and in this book I don't think the ground is particularly solid at all.
Talking about America, you, in 2018, 2 years into the first Trump presidency, you wrote a book called Hacking Trump, or How POTUS Sucker Punched America, Torpedoed Democracy, and Left Us a Choice, Impeachment or Autocracy.
Yeah, but not my title.
Okay. Well, it's such an American title. Honestly, it tells pretty much the whole book with the title. So here we are in the midst of a second Trump presidency, unimaginable at one time. What would you add to that book today? Or would you?
You know, the book was meant to be a kind of remembrance, an attempt at. My publisher asked me to write the book. This was not something I went off deciding I was going to write on my own. My American publisher at the time, and I decided to talked about them and decided I wanted to write a book where I try and record in real time what was happening in those early months of the Trump administration as a kind of aid memoir, because so much was happening so fast that we were, we were forgetting everything, you know, within weeks or months of it happening, and I don't think there's anything. I certainly would never go back to that book to try and like do a new edition. But I think but it was also an examination of the roots of what gave us Trump, going back to the 1970s and 80s, and sort of the political and social contexts, of American politics that brought us to this Trumpian moment. And I think all that's valid, and also it was very much a projection of what was going to happen. And within the first week or so of this new Trump administration, sort of what I predicted was going to happen at the end of the previous Trump administration is now very much happening. Almost sort of, so yeah, we are here.
So going back to Night in Delhi, life as portrayed in Night in Delhi is, was it John Hobbes who said nasty, brutish, and short? It's portrayed as nasty, brutish, and short. There's kind of violence and instability built into the city as portrayed in this book. And although the narrative details an amoral world, I see the narrator as the book's moral center, and the reader ends up caring for him and his fate. So the moral universe is turned on its head, and you don't really realize that this is happening, and you're surprised that it's happening to you as the reader. Is that an accurate description of the book?
Yes, I mean, I cared for the narrator. I don't think it's very hard to write a book, an entire book where you're in the narrator's head, and you're not emotionally in their world. But yeah, I would say it is. Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I'm not sure I would say I believe in a moral universe, but I believe that we live in a universe where we can preserve pockets of morality, because it is, morality is a social construction, blah blah blah. But we can preserve those, and I think the narrator comes to learn that he too can live, within, however tiny it is, his own small moral universe.
In fact, I might take it a step further, and I'd say this could be the thing that kind of binds your different novels and the short stories. There's a collection of short stories called Good Indian Girls, which is about anything but good Indian girls. And one of those stories I remember is a kind of a misogynist African poet who is this loathsome character who you end up, despite yourself, kind of having a regard for. And, I would say that as a writer, you're a moralist. And the body of work, if you look at it, is it's unsentimental and it's a hard nose, to say the least. So how much would it bother you to be called a moralist?
It wouldn't bother me at all. I mean, I'm judgmental, I'm a moralist, I'm probably biased. But no, I mean, I believe in I believe in a moral universe in a certain, in that sense that we must create sort of within our. I certainly don't believe in, this sort of Elon Musk Trumpian world of every dog for itself and fuck you all, But that's, more and more the world we seem to be living in, sadly.
I'm going to quote from an Instagram post that Ranbir did recently, where he looked back at some of reader reviews of of his first book, the book I was just talking about, Good Indian Girls, and where he was called all kinds of things. I'm just going to quote a few of them. Misogynist, sex-obsessed, sexist pervert, orientalist, sexually deviant, a raging dumpster fire, penis worshipper, among other things, and that the stories were disgusting, vomit-inducing, and genuinely just uncomfortable and awful to read. Are you expecting similar reviews for this book? And
Those are the good reviews. Yeah. No, I don't know. We've got good reviews. We've got very good reviews for this book. I don't, you can't, these are people on like Goodreads, whatever, who are like still living in their parents' basements and stuff like this. You don't, how people learn to read books, I don't know, but to have a sense of books are complicated things, stories are complicated things, and we should come to them with a sense of humility. As we all, as writers, we come to our stories, as to our craft of writing with a sense of humility. But yeah, vomit-inducing, great. Maybe you need a purge.
I would use those as blurbs in a collection at some point. We're going to have another reading, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience.
Oh, we are? We're going to read, shall I read something?
Yes.
We are very short. I think there was something sweet. It's just one long paragraph, a couple of long paragraphs. This is Jaggi and the narrator have just wowed some people at a market, and with Jaggi singing, and then they sort of take a bottle of whiskey and go to some whatever spot in Delhi. We lie on a grass embankment abandoned between highways. Contorted steel sculptures rise from small hillocks on all sides as the traffic roars. We forgot about the ice cream and bought more whiskey and wandered out among the boulevards, wearing our chunnis, arms linked at our elbows. There's an old song I remember. I saw it on television, but don't remember where. Two tramps on stage walking arm in arm down an avenue. Maybe Fred Astaire and Judy Garland. But I don't know where the memory comes from, how old I was, why it stayed so long, hidden inside me, waiting to reappear now. Jaggi passes me the bottle and we watch the grey smog hiding the grey clouds. And Jaggi says, soon, with all the money we've saved, we'll go south, we'll swim in the ocean, we'll rent a house, just the two of us, climb trees and pick coconuts and crack them open and drink the water until it spills over our faces and across our chests. He talks on, like the woman in the shop, about all the things we'll be able to do now we have money, real money. He means the money from my job and all the places we'll go, not just south but north, into the mountains where the air is clear and cool, where there's snow, real snow in winter. We can climb and climb, and you're still staring at the tallest mountains on the planet, at great rock beasts so massive they crowd out the sky, even there at the very top of the world. I listen, saying little, enjoying his enthusiasm, and fall asleep to the whiskey, the sound of his voice of the traffic punching the air around us. When I wake, it's night, and the bright lights of cars cut into my eyes. Jaggy is gone, having left the empty bottle standing on the grass as a memorial to this day.
One last question. You were born in London. You studied at the University of Arizona. You live now in Greece. But you return again and again to the Indian story and the Indian diasporic story. How come?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I've certainly written stuff that's, been outside that, and, some of it's unpublished and stuff, but this is the stuff that gets published, right? This is what sort of publishers are interested in often. But B, it's also what holds me, and I think more and more as I grow older, what fascinates me, for whatever reason. I don't know if I'll continue writing on these subjects, but in terms of territory or space, but yeah.
So, over to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Ram. That's okay.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Jeet. As you were speaking, and it struck me that how Night in Delhi is such a youth. It struck me how Night in Delhi is such a youthful novel, and that it's a young.
And I'm a senior citizen.
Exactly. and it's a very youthful voice. The narrator's voice, a very youthful voice, and going back to Dark Star, it's the opposite. It's somebody at the end of her life, and it's a lot about age and aging. Was it a conscious decision? Did you want to be young, or go to a young voice, or get into a young head when you wrote it?
No. I think it's just sort of the story. The story makes its demands, and this voice, this character, rose out of the demands, of the situation and of the story.
Hi, good evening. I love that you're offensive, number one. I like writers who offend, so that's really nice. The thing is, I'm familiar with your name, but I don't read fiction, which is why I had no clue before coming here. I just knew that if it's something at MAP, it's going to be good. But what I wanted to ask you was, you've written 6 books. So the thing that I caught on with when you said that I wasn't sure if the publishers would bite, something along those lines. And the work that you had published previously, when it got such bad reviews, but the thing is, you're established. You've been in the game for a while. So why would that trepidation occur if you know that people already love your work? That little glitch in your head where you're like, I don't know if somebody is going to pick this up. Because if I write something, I know that publishers would be very hesitant because I'm like a nobody, and I write, let's just say I write loud. So I just wanted to know why you would hesitate. That's pretty much it. What would cause that after 6 books?
Yeah. No, it's a very good question. I think all of us writers today, unless we're very well established, find ourselves with each book having to sell that book first to our agent and then to our publisher. And there's no guarantee that a book you write will get published. As Jeet knows, and we both had difficulty getting books published, getting work. Oh yeah, definitely. If you're very established, it's a different thing. Obviously, to publish anything you write that you want to write. But I'm not really this book is not published in the US. It's not published in the UK. I've had this in India. I've had the same editor, and she's moved between. And only 3 of those books have been published in India. I think 3 of those books have been published in India, and then I've had different publishers in the U.S. You know, and for each book actually.
And you might have a different publisher with the next one.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, you hop around a lot sometimes.
And you go with whoever gives you the best deal.
Mm-hmm.
They have no loyalty to you. Why should you have any loyalty to them?
I'd like to ask about the Guru's philosophy. Is there any way of describing what it is, or is it just
What philosophy? I'm sorry.
The Guru who she calls every day?
Oh, you read the book. Okay.
Yeah.
He's speaking of a character in the book who is a guru. We never meet this person. We meet one of the guru's disciples, young American woman named Susan, who's led increasingly astray by this random guru up in Himachal, to the point of quite deeply self-destructive behavior. The guru's philosophy is, well, it's a bit extreme, but it's not that extreme, frankly. I mean, I think if you look at a lot of sort of what's happening today in the world, that guru's philosophy is pretty much just an expression of what a lot of people think. You know, he's managed to weaponize it to allow himself to essentially rape young women. But the philosophy itself, I think, is probably something that a lot of people would ascribe to, sadly. You can read the book and find out what the philosophy is. It's not very exciting.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. So one thing was to, take that conversation forward. You said you write for the publisher, who's sitting in London or US and all. So is it like that is what it is right now? Or was it like this from the beginning? Did you, at any point of time, start writing for the audience rather than the publisher first? And this is what has become now? Or was it like this from the start?
Can I just say one thing? You have to take this with a pinch of salt. He may say that he writes for the publisher, but if you read this book, it's very clear he wrote for himself.
Okay, which is good. Okay, so if
Well,
that's the case, then yeah.
Yeah, if I said
he
I
owns up, then it's good.
yeah, if I said I write for the publisher, I think it was a misspoke. Maybe I misspoke or something, because maybe when I want to write a bestseller, I will try and write for the publisher.
Fair enough,
Yeah, but no, I don't. I'd never write for a publisher. I write very much. Yeah, for myself.
Which is what I thought.
Cure my own emotional hang-ups.
So is this the 6th book easier to write and compared to the first one? Does it get easier as you go along the way?
No, it gets harder. I think each book gets a bit more difficult because you really want to find new space and you want to find new ground and you want to say something new. And at a certain point, you've said a lot of stuff, right? And you don't, you don't want to say the same stuff over and over again.
Okay. And how much time do you spend editing versus writing?
I mean, this book maybe took about 6 months. It was quick. It was a fast book to write. Maybe 6 months to write, and 3 or 4 months of editing with my editor and stuff, if that, and then a bit more as time goes on. But yeah, not so long really. Mm-hmm.
I have a question to both of you, which has been my concern for a while. That while, like Jeet's famous book on Bombay, right? And there is a lot of books on Bombay, but not so many on any of the Indian cities. Delhi books, of course, on forts and gates and all that you get, but fiction, or books in which Delhi itself is a character. So I was very happy when Ranveer's book came out. I thought, oh good, there's a book on Delhi. But would you be able to at least think of reasons why there aren't enough books on Calcutta or Chennai or Bangalore or Delhi or these other big cities, Pune, these cities of India, and why does a writer get so, I mean, Bombay is fascinating, but even these cities are to a great extent. So both of you, if you could answer that.
That's a really valid question. And I think this was true until about, I would say about a decade and a half ago. We used to say that the novelists all lived in Delhi and the poets all lived in Bombay. But there were a lot of novels that came out of Bombay as well. Right now, I would say there are more interesting novels coming out of Delhi and set in Delhi than Bombay. For example, Age of Vice, Nilanjana Roy's thriller set there. There's been a number of really unusual novels out of Delhi in the last half a dozen years. The real question is, why aren't there books like that out of Bangalore, Chennai, Calcutta, Jaipur? Really good question. And I think what's going to happen is we will see a change in that scenario going forward, because unlike US publishing, Indian publishing is open to new voices. They're always looking for, the next novelist, really.
Yeah, I was trying to look for a quote by this the Scottish writer Alistair Gray, who wrote this sort of science fiction, non-science fiction book called Lanark, that was published in 1981, which was the first book that writes about Glasgow as a city and as a world. And he writes the fact that sort of like, and in the book, and I think it's in the book, in Lanark, he writes that sort of a city that is not written about is a city that does not exist. A city that we cannot imagine is a city that we cannot fully inhabit or live in. And in many ways, Alistair Gray, who's also a painter as well, many other things, he gave the Scots a chance to make Glasgow, it's become this sort of great city where all these sort of noirs and mysteries and other sort of great sort of novels are set these days. But this was it was only in 1981 did finally, because someone write about the city itself and give it a personality and a sense of being of existing within an imaginative landscape. But yeah, I hope this book adds to this idea of Delhi as an imaginative landscape. And I think there's a lot of books coming out that write about Delhi in this sense. And maybe Punjab would be the next place to write about in that sense, or somewhere else.
Even Kerala, I've been looking at the novels in translation out of Kerala lately. Some really interesting work coming out of there. I would say Amandeep set a novel in Bangalore. Anybody else? Well, thank you very much. There are copies of Night in Delhi and Dark Star for sale out there. Pick one up, get the author to sign it. Thank you for coming. Here's to a nice Saturday evening.
Yeah, thank you everyone, and thank you to Matt for this lovely event.